New York attorney Mark Sokolow managed to escape the World Trade Center in the September 11 attacks. A few months later, feeling lucky to be alive, he took his family on vacation to Israel.
The last day of our trip was Sunday, January 27th.
In a horrible twist of fate, terror was to strike Sokolow for the second time in 4 months.
We heard this just horrific blast. And right away, I knew that it was a bomb. It was probably a suicide bomber.
The Sokolows were shopping in this Jerusalem shoe store when the suicide bomber struck.
I remember spinning around from the force of the bomb, and it seemed like slow motion. I can't believe this is happening to me. I just can't believe it's happening, and I just thought we were going to die.
The suicide bomber killed one other person and injured 150.
Had you seen yourself in the mirror?
Jamie, the Sokolow's youngest, remembers those terrifying moments.
So right when it happened, I knew what was going on.
You were 12.
Yeah.
I looked up, and a little girl was looking down at me, and she was unrecognizable. Her face was just bleeding, and I had no idea if this could possibly be Jamie, but then I realized that it was.
It was a time of death and destruction on the streets of Israel, the Second Intifada, or Palestinian uprising, marked by repeated terror strikes.
I felt the burning sensation of the bullets going into my body.
Eugene and Lorraine Goldstein were visiting Israel for their grandson's wedding in June 2003, when terrorists randomly opened fire on their Volkswagen.
Did you see who had shot you?
I saw 2 men. I did see them.
Both Lorraine and Eugene had been shot in the head. Their son Howard was driving.
The way his body was weaving back and forth, and I knew that he was gone.
I knew my son was dead, and I was laying there next to my son, and all kinds of things went through my mind. The thought of losing a child and being in that kind of a horrific situation is very overwhelming. It's beyond words. There's not a night, and I tell you this is God's honest truth, I don't think of my son. Every night when I get during the night, I think of him. Of just picturing him laying next to me.
The Goldsteins and Sokolows are now part of a group of landmark lawsuits filed in New York federal court. They include 5,000 terror victims globally, several hundred in the U.S. They're using a novel approach to fight back against the enemy that tore apart their lives. They're suing international banks that they say supported the terrorists.
The lawsuits allege that Arab Bank, Credit Lyonnais, and 2 other foreign banks with New York offices were key to an intricate system that moved cash to aid terrorists and their families. Accounts at Arab Bank allegedly were used to pay cash rewards to families of suicide bombers and other so-called Palestinian martyrs. Records show money was supplied by 2 groups on the U.S. list of foreign terrorist organizations, Hezbollah and Hamas. The terrorist who attacked Mark's family was Wafa Idris, the first female suicide bomber in the conflict.
The family of Wafa Idris presented documentation to Arab Bank showing that they are the family of the woman who committed this attack. And as soon as the bank was satisfied, they made a payment to the family of the equivalent of $5,316.
The payment was supposedly for what?
To compensate the family for loss of a wage earner, for example. Their families probably are adversely affected in a financial way due to their loss of life, but they were suicide bombers, they were terrorists.
The suit alleges that a charity called the Saudi Committee for the Support of the Intifada al-Quds organized millions of dollars in payments from Hamas.
Have you been surprised by how formalized this network was?
Yeah, I could not believe it. It turns out that there was a whole system in place. The Saudi Committee would provide lists of terrorists and their families, all sorts of information to the bank. The Saudi Committee would advertise throughout the West Bank and Gaza and other areas that if you want to contribute funds to help the families of suicide bombers, you can do so by sending us money via the network of bank branches of Arab Bank and perhaps others. It's just shocking to read this. And it was done out in the open. It was done on public websites. It wasn't something that they hid.
None of the banks would talk on camera. They say they merely conducted routine banking activities not intended to promote terror. Credit Lyonnais calls the allegations baseless and absurd. Arab Bank says it abhors terrorism. It reportedly admits transferring $90 million in what it calls humanitarian aid to Palestinians, but says there was no conspiracy to subsidize suicide bombers.
Based on my experience both at Treasury and at the NSC.
CBS News analyst Juan Zarate was the Treasury Department's Assistant Secretary for Terrorist Financing under President George W. Bush.
How big of a deal is this case?
I think this is a set of cases that are incredibly important, not just for the banking community, but also for the counterterrorism world, because it potentially sends a chilling signal to banks around the world that they run the risk of financial and legal liability if they're doing business with terrorist actors.
The bank may say, we didn't know what they were doing. We're simply doing business with a customer.
They knew. They had to know. They could not be in business they didn't know. They didn't become bankers of that magnitude with being stupid. The money that's funneled there to commit terrorism in that part of the world can just as well be done to promote terrorism in this country and finance terrorism in this country. So they have to be stopped.
Terrorists and terrorist organizations need funding like any other organization. It should be important to every American to try to put an end to the funding of terrorism, which we've all seen can actually happen on American soil as well.